All right, another example for you. So again, we're trying to eliminate and figure out what R, S, and T need to be. So first things first, we always label our equations. I always label them A, B, C just because it's a little easier. It doesn't really matter what you choose. Then we have to decide what letter we're going to eliminate, whether it's going to be R, S, or T. In this case, everybody's initial reaction is to go with getting rid of R because they see a positive and -5 and they think, oh, it's going to be easy to deal with. However, I know that in a second option, I'm going to have to use B at some point, which means that I'm now dealing with a coefficient of 20. That to me seems really high, and I'd prefer to avoid it if I can. So actually, the better option here is to use S because I have an S with just a 1 by it. T would be the same way also, but I'm going to use S. All right, so the reason we're not picking R is because we'll end up with bigger coefficients, where here I can multiply this top equation by 2 and by -5 instead of multiplying by 5 and ending up with a 20. So it's just a personal preference. Like we said, it doesn't really matter whether you choose to work with getting rid of R, S, or T first. So I'm going to use A and B, and I'm going to use A and C. Could you choose to use a different set of equations? Absolutely. So I'm going to leave B alone. But I'm going to take A, and I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 2. Now remember, when you're multiplying by any number, you have to multiply all 3 coefficients and the number on the other side by that number. So whether it's multiplying by 3 or 4 or whatever it is, you always have to multiply every single thing in the equation by that number. And on the other side, I'm going to leave equation C alone. And I'm going to multiply the top equation this time by -5. So just like I said before, sometimes you're going to end up with some big coefficients. In this case, I did. So even though I was trying to avoid big coefficients, sometimes it happens. But just like we saw in class today, it'll be okay. It doesn't really matter if you end up with that. All right, adding straight down. So I end up with 14R, my S's cancel, and 5T equals -14. And over here, I end up with -30R equals 30. Oh, that's convenient. Both the S's and the T's canceled out. So this equation is going to simplify much faster than I was expecting, because now here I can simplify for R right away and find out that R must be -1. Then I can take that and plug it in over here. Now I'm going to take a quick step back and explain that a little bit more carefully. So when I added the 2 equations together, my S's canceled out like I planned on, but so did my T's because I have a -5T and a +5T. Since that happened, I'm left with just one letter in my equation, which means I can solve right away. So I divide by -30 and I find R to be -1. So yes, I had to eliminate twice, but now I already have a variable, so I don't have to eliminate a third time, and I can plug this back in and find out what T needs to be. So 14 times -1 plus 5T equals -14. So -14 plus 5T equals -14. Add the 14s to the other side, and I end up with 5T equals 0. Now, for some reason, whenever we get to this point, I always have students who freak out and tell me they must have done something wrong. But remember that when you get 0 over here, all that means is that when you divide by 5, T has to be 0, because the only thing you can multiply by any number and get 0 as an answer is 0. Okay, so I've got R, I've got T. I'm going to take both of them back to one of my original equations. Now, like I said in class, I always use the original printed equations. Even if I've rewritten it exactly as I think it's written over here, I just don't like to take the chance, and I like to go back to my original equations, just in case I ever make a mistake. So R, don't know what S is yet, plus 0 equals -4. So -5 plus S equals -4. Add my 5s, and I end up with S being 1. So that one was much faster than we were expecting. All right, so on your homework over here, we need to find out some solutions. So you may have noticed in the first set of equations here that A and B, if you added them, or I'm sorry, B and C, if you added them, would have canceled out right away. All right, let's take a look. So -4, -2, -1, -5, 2. So if you have a friend who's in Advanced Algebra 2, they can do a way of doing this in their calculator that will give them solutions very quickly. So if you happen to have a friend who does it, that's why they're able to figure these out really quickly. So this first one should be -4, -3, 4 for A, B, and C. So that's the trick I'm employing right here, right now for you to figure out those solutions. -5. So the reason we don't teach the trick to you guys is because we don't require you to have a graphing calculator, so there's no reason for you to have the way to do this on your own. Now, if you happen to have a graphing calculator and you're interested in learning how to do it on your own, I can show you, but it's really not necessary because our method is fairly efficient for figuring out the answers. 6, -6. And the last one here. -12 and -15. Ooh, I must have typed something in wrong. Let's take another look. Yep, should be 21. And finally, our last answers here should be 1, 4, 0. And again, that's A, B, C, A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. So in case you have any questions about these, feel free to stop by. I can explain them in a little bit more detail, but those should be your solutions.